I'm just going to pass it over to Kevin to kick us off.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have a little fireside chat, beaming in folks from Mexico City. Welcome, everyone, from the other side of the world. So this is the last panel of the conference, which is always an interesting and challenging panel, but it means that everyone here is survivors. We're all an audience that is really interested in Latin America and financing in Latin America, and I realize that I'm probably the last thing between you guys and Rioja champagne, and for at least folks from Cleantech Group, bottles of tequila. But we have a great panel today. We've got folks coming in from Mexico, and I'd really encourage you guys to make this a dialogue. We will have a formal Q&A session towards the end of it, but I encourage you, if there's ever something of interest that you want to ask a question about, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll just make it more of a dialogue. As I said, we've got a tremendous panel today, so I encourage you to leverage their expertise. I'll do a little bit. I'll first introduce myself and why I'm here, and then have folks go down the line and talk a little bit about themselves and their organization, just to provide a little bit of context for who was on the panel and their responses, as well as where you might direct some questions. So my name is Kevin Reed. I'm a partner at a Brazilian domestic VC based in Rio. We're called Antera, Gestão de Recursos. We manage the largest seed stage fund in Latin America and have made 36 investments over the last 4 years in a diversified set of sectors. I'll quickly introduce folks down the line, and if you could talk a little bit about yourself and your organization. We've got Ruzgar Barisik from IFC. You've got Gerardo Ferrando from Water Capital, Mark Eases from USAID, based out of Mexico, Daniel Magallón from BASE-greenTEK Ventures, and Gemelina Ramirez from Inter-American Development Bank. So, Ruzgar, maybe a little introduction to yourself.
Sure, thank you. Is this mic working, by the way? I think it just kicked in. Hi, my name is Ruzgar Barisik. I work for the IFC. There are some very strong multilateral development organizations who cover Latin America. I think some of them are on this panel. So I don't know how much you know about the IFC. By the way, I can see you straining to hear me. Can you hear me? Ooh, fine, okay, good. So the IFC is part of the World Bank. Just a quick introduction. We are the private sector investment arm. So compared to our colleagues on the other side of the street at the World Bank, who primarily work with governments in terms of providing aid and grants and development assistance, the IFC is an investment firm. We're the private sector investment arm. We work exclusively with companies, and we provide all kinds of financing. And for those who don't know us, the way I tend to describe my organization is really akin to a large commercial bank that only works in emerging markets. In terms of size, in terms of focus, in terms of the way we make investments, there are some distinct similarities and a few differences that I can get into. We basically invest about $18 billion annually across all emerging markets. We often also work with companies, global sponsors and companies that are based in what we call Part 1 countries, the US, Europe, who are going to emerging markets, so those are certainly clients as well. And like any large financial organization, a lot of what we do is debt and loans, and a good amount is equity. And I personally sit within the Cleantech team, so I lead our investments within Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. And I'll attempt to speak on behalf of my partner who covers Latin America here, which is a huge focus area for us. We do about $4 billion annually in Latin America. Not all of that is Cleantech, clearly, but a growing amount is. And we are both a direct as well as fund investor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gerardo Ferrando. I'm managing director of Water Capital. Water Capital is a Mexican company. We have about 15 years in the financial sector. Our business model evolves around financing decentralized wastewater treatment plants for private customers in Mexico. Like I said, we've been doing this for about 15 years. The market has evolved, and we've been able to apply the same financing business model to other sustainable assets, such as renewable power. So we're very active in this upcoming wave of development of photovoltaics in Mexico. Other areas that we participate is in energy efficiency projects, mostly for the industrial sector, and also in lighting. In addition to this clean tech financing areas, we do have traditional business units where we do equipment and machinery leasing. Our business model, like I've been saying, it's based on leasing, and what we like to do is to partner with technology providers where we can go to a customer and offer a bundle solution. So the customer doesn't need to worry about finding the financing, finding the EPC, finding the design aspect of the solution. We tend to come with that, with those partners and do a fully implemented solution where the client just pays as the service is provided. I'm based in San Francisco. We have an office there where we are kind of monitoring developments of technologies in these spaces that I mentioned, where we can help them, we identify them, and then we try to partner with them to deploy them in mostly in Mexico, but also in other countries in Latin America.
Hello, my name is Daniel Magallón. I'm the managing director of BASE. BASE is a foundation based in Switzerland, and we are dedicated to mobilize finance and investment to sustainable energy and climate change. Basically, we develop business models and financial instruments to make clean tech competitive against conventional energy. We have a special focus in emerging markets. We are we have a lot of activity in Latin America. We are working at the moment in Mexico, Colombia, Nicaragua, Chile, Argentina, Haiti, and Bolivia. We have different types of financial instruments that we develop, sometimes very sophisticated financial instruments like risk mitigation instruments, for example, a wind derivative to decrease the risk of the wind resources for wind farms in Mexico. Or we have developed, or we are developing at the moment, green equity funds in emerging markets, where we have at the moment one equity fund in Mexico, a $100 million fund dedicated to green projects, and the target is to build 12 country-specific green equity funds in emerging markets, 4 in Latin America, 4 in Asia, and 4 in Africa. By the other side, we are moving to other areas, and in financing we are doing now microfinancing. That is a very exciting area too. We are developing insurance in different sectors. We have developed insurance for biomass plants in India in order to decrease the risk of the investment and allow the flow of money to these areas. In Haiti, we are developing a very, very innovative business model. I'm going to explain it very quickly. Is to link the remittances that are sent by immigrants that work in a developed country. In this case, Haitians that live in Miami and New York, and link it with financial instruments to finance renewable energy systems that are delivered to the family in Haiti. So that's what we do. And Mexican, by the way.
Okay, maybe we'll send it over to Mexico. Gemelina, can you introduce you and your organization?
Thank you to the organizers for allowing us to participate all the way from Mexico to Bilbao. My name is Gemelina Ramirez. I am climate change specialist at IDB, working in the Mexico country office. First, I would like to say a little bit about the IDB, and then more particularly about our climate change agenda, which focuses on, in some parts, to some extent, in renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies. So the IDB is a regional development bank that supports efforts in Latin America and the Caribbean countries to reduce poverty and inequality. We were established in 1959, and by now we are the leading source of development financing for Latin America and the Caribbean, with strong commitment to achieve results, measurable results, increased integrity, transparency, and accountability. While we are like a regular bank in many ways, we also do activities. Besides loans, we also provide grants, technical assistance, and we do research. Our shareholders are 48 member countries, and including 26 Latin America and Caribbean borrowing members who have a majority ownership of the IDB. The IDB is working on incorporating environmental issues, including climate change, in national development plans, national budgetary processes, and key economic sector strategies, with a focus on climate change and sustainability. Now, moving a little bit more focused on what is our work in Mexico, I would like to highlight that the climate change agenda in Mexico has the most intense and robust in the region, positioning Mexico as the main beneficiary of the bank in this sector in climate change, and demonstrating a number of technical and financial products which have been replicated in other countries in the region. This includes, in particular, 3 loans that are called policy-based loans, which total up to more than $900 million. We've also funded 6 programs with funds from the Climate Investment Fund, which is concessional climate financing, totaling up to $218 million. And we've also offered various technical assistance activities, which add up to approximately $11 million for climate change and clean energy. In particular, the kind of projects that we promote in Mexico are related to renewable energy, low carbon sustainable housing, and forest management. These are projects. We also do or carry out a lot of capacity building activities with the national government and state level government. For all these sectors that I mentioned, renewable energy, housing, and forestry, the IDB has promoted the design of green credit lines, which actually positions the IDB as the agency that has the most green financing programs in the region. We do not do this alone. We do this in strict collaboration with the federal government, and we do also have some vehicles to channel funding to the state level. And finally, I would like to talk about the Emerging and Sustainable Cities Initiative. This initiative, we consider it relevant for this forum because the sectors that I previously mentioned are project-based. So that means we actually support or focus on the supply side of clean technologies, whereas the Emerging and Sustainable Cities Initiative is actually a technical cooperation that we work at the national level with states to generate their urban development plans, which includes 3 pillars. One of them is environmental and climate change, and we obviously in the activities or the interventions that end up highlighted in the action plan should be focused or well, I guess I'm being too strong saying should be, but it actually turns out that the community and the state government ends up requiring technologies that are sustainable. And so a lot of this intervention areas ends up being covering the demand side for clean technology projects. So I hope to have a chance to tell you a little bit more throughout the panel. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mark Gietzi. Good afternoon. I am an economic growth officer with the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, in Mexico. And USAID is the U.S. government's foreign assistance agency. We support U.S. foreign policy objectives by promoting human development, democracy and good governance, and free markets. USAID works in over 100 countries throughout the world and promotes various activities from improved health and education to broad-based economic growth to agricultural development to environmental sustainability. And we also help societies prevent and recover from conflict and provide humanitarian assistance in the wake of natural and man-made disasters. We are interested in supporting clean technology because of the U.S. government's commitment to address the challenges associated with climate change. We know that the application of new technologies and practices offers the prospect for continued economic growth while simultaneously reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In Mexico, USAID supports the government of Mexico and private sector initiatives to promote renewable energy and clean technologies, basically for two reasons. One, these activities contribute to the government of Mexico's efforts to move the country towards a low-carbon growth pathway. And also, by supporting clean technology entrepreneurs, we help to enhance Mexico's competitiveness and catalyze its transition to an innovation-driven economy. So with that, I'll pass it back to you.
I think the way that we've thought about this panel is really around two themes. One is, what are the trends, opportunities, challenges with getting projects in the ground, product development finance. What are the international institutions doing to help players? Where can international entrepreneurs, investors help plug in and kind of develop these markets? There's a huge push in a lot of countries in Latin America for big clean tech projects, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and some specific projects and challenges that folks are seeing. The other one, and we didn't want to ignore it, because oftentimes talk about clean tech and financing is all around projects, but it's to really look at innovation that is happening in Latin America and happening at tech parks around the region and in universities, and the growth of venture capital and other kind of early stage financing mechanisms to help grow that innovation that exists in some of these research centers and may have a harder time getting out in the form of a young company, a type of model that you see with a little bit more frequency and success in Silicon Valley and other more mature venture markets, as well as looking at other financing models beyond VC that can help some innovation grow into a successful company. So I think we're going to start the conversation a little bit more on project finance and talk about some interesting models and challenges in that space. With a perspective on Brazil, thinking about what are some of the hot sectors, where we're seeing incredible amounts of growth. Wind is really the dominant renewable that we're seeing coming online. Growth has been about 80% year over year the last couple of years, with anticipated growth of 30% per year for the remainder of the decade, growing from about 2.5. Thinking about stuff that's just waiting to be transitioned connected today, it's about 3 gigawatts installed to grow to 16 gigawatts by the end of the decade. Huge kind of government push in getting wind as a dominant new energy source as part of the Brazilian energy mix. We're seeing a lot of things happening in solar today, both with new incentives to create motivation for large-scale projects, as well as new regulation that make it easier for residential and commercial solar. And then obviously a lot of growth around biomass co-located in industrial parks. So those are some of the sectors that we're seeing in Brazil, having a lot of growth and international interest and a lot of dollars being invested in those types of projects. To kick it off to the panel, I wanted to maybe start with Ruzgar, talking a little bit about what are some sectors in project finance in other countries, as well as around Latin America, as well as particular sectors that are of interest to IFC or other partners that you work with.
Thank you. So I think the way you divided it up, is also akin to how we look at it internally. I guess on one hand, we think of large-scale project finance, and on the other hand, we think of it in terms of pushing the innovation agenda. And that's anything from new technologies, tech transfer, new business models, and kind of creating the link towards project finance, really kind of proof of concept type of project equity and project finance for first installations. I'll spend a little bit of time on the former and I think a little bit more on the innovation side. In terms of project finance and project equity, I think there's a fairly, compared to other parts of the world, I think there's a fairly vibrant market in Latin America. Certainly in the large dominant economies, and to a lesser extent in the periphery. The way I think we tend to try to really catalyze investment and deliver on our mandate is in terms of going after first-of-kind projects. So based on our volume, and most of our volume still comes from the, let's call them kind of plain vanilla large-scale project finance debt investments. But I think there are a lot of, comparatively speaking, a lot of players in that field. They're in some of the largest markets like wind in Brazil, the economics aren't that great. And so where as an organization I think we'll really push the envelope is if you're doing a first of its kind project in a country. And in those instances we'll do up to 50% of the project financing. We'll do it with first time sponsors if the conditions are right. And we'll really get excited if it's a local sponsor who's doing it. And traditionally, more than half of our business across the IFC has been with global sponsors who are going to emerging markets, but more and more, and at this point up to 50% is actually local sponsors, local industrials who are getting into the game in their countries or who are hopscotching into other emerging markets, and we want to be supporting those. So I think in terms of large-scale project finance, and Gerardo can opine more on that one, we'll really get aggressive when it comes to basically demonstrating a first-in-country type of play. On the innovation side, the story is a little bit different. We see really tremendous opportunities in Latin America, and I'll tell you a little bit about which sectors. But the financing environment is a little more constrained, and so there the big gap is actually for us to kind of find and catalyze co-investors who can come into deals with us. I'll come back to that in a second, but in terms of sectors, for Latin America, we're very much taking the outlook of really the food, water, and energy security triangle. Those three are linked with each other, and the story looks a little bit different in Brazil, where hydro is a huge part of the story than, say, Bolivia. But still, those three components are interrelated, and we're paying a lot of attention to those. So if I have to highlight among them, on the innovation side, agriculture and specifically agricultural technologies are a huge focus area for us. We're trying to invest all across the agri-supply chain, which means we're looking very intensively, and sidebar here, what's great about Latin America is it's not just a tech transfer play for us. In certain geographies, we're just practically, we will not find a lot of innovation coming out of the geography. It'll have to be, in essence, exported in. But in Latin America, in certain sectors, it's not just tech transfer. We're actually seeing inherent innovation that we can back from a venture capital standpoint. So agricultural technologies is one of them. We're looking at anything from the inputs, which is seed technologies, bio-derived chemicals, irrigation, remote sensing, smart farming. We think there are great opportunities, certainly in Brazil, but also in other agriculturally heavy economies. On the ag tech side, and then the second one I would highlight is energy efficiency plays. So that's anything from lighting, and Gerardo and I had an interesting conversation about that yesterday. So it's anything from solid-state LED lighting opportunities and new business models around that, to smart grid plays, to, I want to say, off-grid solar on the innovation side. Industrial biotech is huge, we think, in Latin America, both from a feedstock standpoint. You have the basis, and then the economies are vibrant enough that you can get local offtakes as well. So we're really trying to push those from a venture capital standpoint. And then as we're getting more active, we're also looking to, and this might be a little bit of a surprise, we are very much looking to take up LP interests in local venture capital funds that are cleantech oriented. There aren't many. We just got approval for our first one in Southern America, and we're definitely looking for more GPs that can get us smarter, that can get us into these markets, and that can really catalyze investment in there.
Thank you, Ruzgar. Yeah, so going back to the project development, project finance part of the conversation here, similar to Brazil, Mexico has had its first big wave of wind development. We have about 1.2 gigawatts installed, and half of it has been public tenders with the state-owned utility, CFE, but the other half has been through this self-supply scheme that can be applicable in Mexico, where private off-takers enter into PPAs with producers. Those big projects obviously get well covered by the large financial institutions, the multilateral agencies, and the big infrastructure funds. So those will continue to get done, and that segment will continue to grow. In terms of the area where we're more involved, which is more on the small to medium-sized projects, the story is a little bit more challenging. As Ruzgar was saying, some of the local capital markets are not as sophisticated or as deep as other more developed economies. So we've been playing in that sector for 14, 15 years, where we've been able to implement our model by doing small projects and then put them together into a larger scale portfolio that then we can sell to a larger investor. And we've been successful at doing that through the local public markets and also with larger financial institutions. So there's a huge opportunity for growth in that scale of projects, and that's where, you know, decentralized photovoltaic generation will have a huge impact in Mexico and other economies as well. We also see that waste to energy will be a massive opportunity, that it's starting to happen on the biogas, biomass, and then also on the newer gasification technologies that are emerging. And then on the innovation side, I think the ecosystem is finally coming together. You need different pieces for entrepreneurs to come up with their ideas and then get them to the finish line. So what Ruzgar was saying about trying to bring LPs into Mexico, into Latin America, you're starting to see much more interest. There's a lot of first-time fund managers in Mexico. That's creating some challenges to get them, to get some LPs comfortable with them. But there's some agencies, government agencies, that are helping, sponsoring, investing in those funds to anchor them and get them started. And that's starting to build traction and allow foreign LPs to get into the game. So that's really exciting. Universities are catching on this. They're seeing that they need to gear students towards be innovative, take their ideas and organize them, and then be able to present them so people can help them and help them development to a real business plan. I'll stop there because we have many more speakers.
Yeah, no, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to shift a little bit. I think, you know, there's a lot of discussion about opportunities in renewables. Wind is obviously something that we've heard, and it's this established technology, and there's money there to start putting it in the ground and continuing that to accelerate that, biomass and others. Jamelina, I wanted to maybe kick it over to you and, you know, maybe move beyond renewables and talking about smart cities and urban development. In Rio, there's a famous operations center there built by IBM in 2010 that brings in 30 different streams of information to kind of help manage operational control across the city. Curious to learn more about kind of smart city developments, as well as how entrepreneurs from Europe and investors from Europe might be able to work in those areas in Latin America.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Well, as I mentioned, we have the Emerging and Sustainable Cities initiative. We're focusing on cities with populations between 100,000 to 2 million inhabitants, with economies that are growing rapidly. Why is this? Well, because we've noticed that the urbanization is taking place at a very fast pace in Latin America, and actually the urbanization rate has gone up from 62% in 1980 to 80% in 2007. And takes us to that the mega cities are no longer those with the highest rates of growth, and the region's urban population increasingly consists of residents of the intermediate size rather than large cities. These cities, since are medium-sized, they are still characterized by unacceptably high proportions of their population living in governance, scarcity of resources. So the IDB has structured this initiative based on non-reimbursable. We come into a municipality that wants to work with IDB, and we actually have ways of working with them, either straight with IDB funding, or they're also partnerships with private sector or organizations, non-governmental organizations. For example, for the case of La Paz in Baja California Sur, this is the sixth city included in the initiative, and this is the case where the diagnosis and the action plan were developed with funding and support from private foundations like FEMSA and International Community Foundation, based on IDB methodology. So what is, as I mentioned, this the idea of working and developing this plan is to focus on three main pillars and come and do an analysis of environmental and climate change dimensions, and focusing on environmental management and local pollution control, mitigation, and reduction measures. With regards to the urban development dimension, we focus on this design and quality of urban services and efficiency of its urban transport network. On the fiscal sustainability dimension, we focus on the ability of local governments to prioritize and finance investments, fund and maintain their urban and social services, control expenditures and debt adequately, and make decisions in a transparent manner. So at the end of exercise, which is about a year and a half, end up of a plan of action. This plan, and then we support the government promoting or identifying sources of funding with this action plan, and that could come either from own federal, state level funds, private sector, or some kind of partnership. And in this way, as I mentioned earlier, is how we see the niche or the creation of or the need also to access clean technology projects that ensure the sustainability of the city in these aspects that I mentioned. For example, in the case of La Paz, it was identified that water was a problem, so the interventions or the financing that is being sought after right now would be towards a water plant treatment. Also, the access to electricity, since it is not connected, this particular city is not connected to the general grid, to the federal CFE grid. They are looking to establish their own mini hydro power plant. And at this stage is where IDB will start kind of letting go. After the plan, the state or the municipality is free to identify other sources of funding, but we still do walk along with them. So just to make it clear, we do not necessarily finance this plan, but we support and encourage the whole organization and creation of plans for development, sustainable urban development that will lead towards a low carbon path and sustainable livelihood. And so this is mainly the initiative. Right now we have 6 cities. By 2013, we're starting to work in 7 more. And our aim is that by 2015, we will be working with 26 countries throughout Latin America.
I'm going to move us on, but Mark, I wanted to talk a little bit about for folks who are not familiar with Latin America and some of the challenges of doing project development, raising finance down there. If you could talk maybe a little bit about the differences between product development in the U.S., product development in the EU, and in Latin America, some of the specific challenges that folks, if they're coming into the market, should be aware of. And we are having some technical difficulties, a little bit difficult to hear, so maybe a brief response would be best. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Some of the areas in Mexico that USAID is working on in order to strengthen are the areas of policy development, institutional capacity building, and the creation of financing tools that will encourage investment in clean energy projects and renewable energy.
Difficulties in development or challenges and opportunities that they present?
Yeah, right. Well, first, I think the opportunities are in the technology deployment more than in technology development. And there you will find a lot of barriers. Actually, James mentioned some of them, and the financial is one of them. But I would say it's not because of lack of financing or lack of liquidity, because if you go to Colombia or you go to Chile or Mexico, there's plenty of money to be invested. It's only that the investors invest their money in projects that they perceive are less risky or that they perceive that can provide higher returns. So basically you are competing with these kind of projects. So the secret here is to develop a business model that you can tie to with your technology in order to de-risk those kind of projects. And I can give a very simple example. We just finished an analysis of electric buses in Colombia, in Bogota. The price of the returns on investment on that bus compared with a diesel bus is very competitive. The main risk perceived there are the batteries. The cost of the bus is the double price of a normal diesel bus. So what has been done is to take out the cost of the batteries from the bus, and then the company that is providing or selling these buses is offering a leasing system in these batteries. So basically, the main risk perception of this technology, and it's easier for the investors to invest in this kind of technology. So this is just one example of a business model, and I think we need a lot of innovation in that part in Latin America in order to allow the clean tech technologies to flow to these markets.
One thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is, and something that I'm seeing in Brazil, is an increased international attention for venture capital and innovation markets. And Ruzgar talked a little bit about what they're interested in IFC. And just in Brazil, we're seeing a lot of US VCs coming down and doing specific deals. We've got a couple of new international funds that are focused specifically on Brazil. Redpoint recently joined with eVentures to form a Brazil fund based in Sao Paulo, operations in Rio. We're seeing a lot of corporate sponsorship of innovation. Interesting, some Brazilian companies are moving into corporate venture. A lot of multinationals that have established venture units, they're talking about opening up a group in Brazil that's focused on that region. Intel has invested in a lot of clean tech companies, Brazilian clean tech companies, not just internet and social media companies. Cisco recently put in money as an LP in 2 Brazilian funds. So a lot of interesting activity, and my being at this forum and having people coming up to me and asking, what is going on in Brazil beyond just projects and strategic resources has been a real welcome signal, and hopefully the beginning of a longer-term trend. And I want to throw it out to the panel of where are you seeing international interest in innovation investment, in Mexico, other parts of Latin America, and I'll throw it to the panel.
I'll take a stab. So just following what Daniel was saying, sorry. By nature, investors in Latin America and Mexico specifically tend to be so risk averse. They're seeking high return, low risk, of course. Everybody is. But as you start seeing these new venture capital groups develop in the area, there truly are growth capital private equity groups that are not really willing to get into the proof of concept stage of a venture. That's a big challenge right now, because these great ideas that are emerging in the area of shared economy ventures and taking waste and converting to resources, they're having a hard time finding that seed capital to get past that proof of concept. I'm hoping to see foreign investors co-partner with local asset managers to kind of push the envelope closer to where the things get detonated. I think that could be a huge influence to move the market to that initial stage where we need, it's essential to make these great ideas into realities.
I agree with that, and while I don't have too much empirical data, my sense is that while clean tech venture is still constrained as an asset class from the LP standpoint, there is a bit kind of less of a perception that Latin America is overheated or overvalued in that sense as some other geographies. So that's good news. I do think that as kind of the traditional LPs are, not jumping in the water, really the corporate players are taking up much more of a role. Certainly Cleantech lends itself to that, and then the verticals within Cleantech that are especially, I think, applicable, they all are, but certain ones really, I think, stand out a bit, which are in bio-derived chemicals and biofuels and in the kind of water and waste sector, do attract attention, I think, disproportionately from the corporate investors. And that's at least some good news for local companies and developers who are trying to pull something off with their bootstraps.
Yeah, I think I would say this market is still has been growing now. 3 years ago in Mexico, probably we have 25 private equity venture capital funds, from which 20 were dedicated completely to growth capital, to big companies, and 5 were doing venture capital work, but in a very conservative manner. And if you move to the south, just to Colombia, you will find 3 venture capital, or private equity, basically. They are not doing venture. And in Chile, it's the same amount. And Brazil, obviously, is more sophisticated. But I would say that this is like the chicken and egg thing. Latin America doesn't invest too much in research and development. So the projects that you have, the interesting technology that you see, we saw some technologies here, have a very hard time to find seed capital or venture funds. Mm-hmm. And by the other side, the size of the market in terms of developing or deploying proven technology is huge. So these are 2 different sizes of markets and 2 different approaches, where even the risk on deployment of this technology is lower, with very attractive returns than with the other that could be attractive returns, but it's very high risk.
I see that we have about 5 minutes left. So I wanted to open it up to the floor. I have plenty of other questions, but wanted to take any specific questions that the audience might have regarding anything on project finance, innovation financing in Latin America. And if not, I'll continue with my list of questions, but feel free to jump up if you have one. James?
Yeah. So I'm curious. Curious to hear from the development agencies. In a lot of the things that we've looked at in Latin America, everybody's excited about the quantity of money that the development agencies have, like USAID or IFC. But there's sometimes I hear mixed reviews. I hear some people saying that it's been a good process, similar to what they would go through with a bank. Other people saying it's very slow. What are you guys doing to make the process to invest in projects faster and more expedient, and communicate the value proposition to an investor or to a project developer from going through your process? If you could comment on that.
So, I mean, what do we do to communicate? I think these are good events to have those conversations in an open forum and one-on-one, which I'd be happy to do. We have to be, so the way we work is we need to catalyze investment into companies. So first of all, what that means is we need to cut terms that are market. Otherwise, nobody else is going to follow us, right? That goes in both directions. And secondly, it means we have to be responsive and follow market timelines. Otherwise, co-investors will be ahead of us, or they'll never get there. So, I mean, long story short is we go through a pretty set investment process, which starts with a concept review that can happen within basically 2 weeks of getting substantial information from a client. It's a two-stage process that allows us then to meaningfully engage, do our diligence, put our contracts in order, and then we go through a final approval process, and that's a little bit different than the way a normal venture or a private equity firm would work, but very much akin to how a commercial bank operates with their credit committees. And depending on the instrument, I believe we do that within the timeframes that the private sector also does. So within venture, we can do deals within a few months, 3, 4, or 5 months. Less than 3 is really not doable, but I don't see that many venture firms, unless they're headed by one individual, cutting that check in, a few weeks either. And on the commercial side, there's a lot more documentation with large loans and a lot more provisions, and those processes can take 6 months, 12 months, and longer. But we do try to work very much in sync with the private sector.
Mark, can you talk a little bit about working with USAID?
Yes, USAID typically does not cut deals with private sector firms. Basically, what we're trying to do is support the government of Mexico's climate change objective. And we do support projects that we think provide demonstration effects or proof of concept so that these projects will have a catalytic effect on the development of renewable energy in Mexico. But we don't typically work directly with specific companies.
On the floor?
From the IDB perspective, we do have an entity that is equivalent to IFC. So there are deals that the IDB does break with the private sector projects. I am not representing that area. I am more familiar with the public work that we do with the federal government. And I would like to highlight, in the case of Mexico, we created a few years ago the Renewable Energy Finance Facility, which is managed by a National Development Bank, by NAFIN. And so what IDB did was to channel international funds, concessional financing, directly to NAFIN. And NAFIN is the front office, let's say, to project developers that are looking for finance for their renewable energy projects. And I am aware that the pace of work or how to work with NAFIN is just as an average project with a development, National Development Bank, so in terms of timing and rates, etc.
Any final questions from the floor? Well, I think we may have made up some time, but I see my time is up. But so I wanted to pass it off. Well, first, thank the panelists for coming today and talking. We'll be around at the reception if anyone has specific questions. I'm happy to talk more about investment, innovation in the region more generally with anyone else. But without further ado, I'll pass it back to Richard. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you. So don't worry, I won't keep you long. If you wouldn't mind just staying there, because I'm sure you're about to get bombarded. This is the end, sadly. I guess we've done a lot of thanks. I don't want to thank all the people we need to thank that we have been thanking. There's 2 left as far as I'm concerned. Very much enjoyed the afternoon, and the afternoon happened largely because of Green Momentum and Innovask and all of you making the effort to be here to help start educating us about Latin America, and I hope that has achieved the objectives of everybody. There's a second group of people who probably there's only a few in the room, but if they could pass on our thanks. But I felt we didn't call out sufficiently the help we get from a whole series of volunteers. And I just want to say on behalf of Cleantech Group, our forums do not run as smoothly as this without you, and we very much appreciate it. So thank you very much. So my final words say something like this. We try to design these events such that every one of the 450 people who've probably been through here in the last 3 days goes home having had a totally different experience from everyone else, because you go to different sessions, you take different things from it, you create different leads, and you have different experiences. My hope is that each one of you, though, has achieved something against all those 3 aspects, and that you will, as soon as we announce the date for the Cleantech Forum Europe next year, it'll be in your diary, even though it won't be in the lovely Bilbao, it'll just be in the lovely Stockholm instead. So I wish to thank you for making the time to be with us. We've very much enjoyed it. I hope you'll keep in touch with Cleantech Group, both in what we do on the research side throughout the year and our other events. And it just remains for me to say, safe journey home, but do take one last drink off us outside before you do. Thank you.